do his Sunday school lesson, and also had an interview with him and so forth. So I'm going to read just a couple of quick passages from that epilogue, called Sunday Morning in Plains. Southwest Georgia is Baptist country. The back roads heading south out of Columbus are bracketed by red soil, scruffy pines, and clapboard buildings sporting names like Shiloh Marian Baptist Church, Zion Hill Baptist Church, Piney Grove Missionary Baptist Church, and Greater Good Hope Baptist Church. Love Jesus no matter what, one roadside sign reads, and another, only Jesus saves. Outside of Preston, Georgia, still another sign implores, take Jesus for your Savior. And the Preston Baptist Church has posted each of the 10 Commandments on a chain-link fence for the edification of travelers passing through town. Just before crossing from Webster into Sumter County, Georgia, signs on Georgia Highway 27 point toward Archery, the boyhood home of Jimmy Carter, and then the road eases into Plains, where it becomes Church Street. The business district, not much more than a block long, lies just beyond the railroad tracks, across the street from the former Seaboard Coast Line Railroad Depot that served as campaign headquarters for Carter's improbable run for the presidency in 1976, and now is a museum commemorating that campaign. Plains, Georgia is no longer the hub of excitement that it was in the summer of 1976, when legions of journalists and thousands of tourists descended to learn more about the Democratic nominee for president. Then, Lillian Carter held court at the train station, and Billy Carter threw back a few beers and entertained visitors with quips like, I've got a mother who joined the Peace Corps and went to India when she was 68. I've got a sister who races motorcycles, and another sister who's a holy roller preacher. I've got a brother who says he wants to be president of the United States. Then, pausing for dramatic effect, I'm the only sane one in the family. And I talk about going to church with Jimmy Carter, his Sunday school class, and then his church, and then meeting with him after church, and he takes me to the presidential house, to his house, because he wants to give me a book, which he catched from Rosalind's nightstand because he couldn't find a new copy of the book, and he gave it to me, kind of looking at her to see what her reaction would be, rather apologetically. And then he goes on to another event. As the caravan rumbled past the security gates toward Carter's next appointment, I headed out of town on Highway 61, also known as Old Plains Highway, by way of Archery, which parallels the Seaboard Coast Line railroad tracks that young Jimmy Carter walked as a boy in order to sell boiled peanuts in town for pocket money. All of Carter's life, it occurred to me, had been characterized by striving and this insatiable ambition to rise above his circumstances as a country boy, as a Navy midshipman, as a state politician, as president, and beyond as respected world leader and humanitarian. In the course of his Sunday school lesson, Carter had referred to Martin Luther's notion of the priesthood of believers, that each of us is responsible directly to God, and that the priestly caste or the arrogation of ministerial authority actually impeded that relationship. But Carter failed to note Luther's other central criticism of medieval Catholicism, works righteousness, the popular understanding that individuals could earn salvation by dint of good works. Protestants are equally susceptible, seeking to prove by their good works that they are among the elect. As I passed the hardscrabble farm in Archery, it was difficult to escape the impression that Carter was still driven, almost obsessed, by a kind of works righteousness. Carter always believed in the value of work. On the farm, hard work would sustain the family and bring profitability. At school, diligent study would lead to better opportunities. In Hyman Rickover's Navy, hard work might win praise or even a promotion. On the campaign trail, working harder than your opponent, an hour earlier every morning or shaking more hands would lead to victory. Once in office, long hours, the resolve to read every piece of legislation, and attention to the minutiae of negotiations would ensure success and re-election. Carter's term in the White House disrupted that calculus. He faced intractable odds as president, the nation's chronic energy dependence, soaring interest rate, an Islamic revolution in Iran, political opposition from within his own party that simply would not yield to hard work or longer hours. Carter's shattering electoral loss in 1980 represented not only the end of his political career, but also a repudiation of the notion that if he just worked harder and longer, his efforts would be rewarded. How could the electorate not recognize that he was doing everything humanly possible, working as hard as he could to solve these problems? After absorbing his defeat and returning to Plains, Carter reaffirmed his commitment to works righteousness as a way to redeem his loss. The Carter Center would be an activist institution, not merely a celebratory one. Habitat for Humanity was nothing if not an activist organization. This former president would not retire quietly into private life. There was work to be done, eradicating disease, monitoring elections, building houses, reprimanding dictators and obdurate politicians, teaching Sunday school, heading off military confrontations, ending hunger, making peace. If Carter could work hard enough, if, in religious terms, he could accumulate enough merit, he might be able to tilt the balance of history in his favor. To a remarkable degree, Jimmy Carter's commitment to the ethic of works righteousness met with success. Although partisans continued to criticize and even to ridicule his presidency, historians now regard it more favorably, albeit with something less than unvarnished approbation. Carter's activities after leaving office earned him praise and even grudging admiration. The awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 provided perhaps the ultimate validation of Carter's works righteousness. At what point, however, does Carter earn a reprieve from his moral exertions? When can he relax and settle into a hard-won retirement? Certainly not on a Sunday in Plains. Even after teaching Sunday school, attending church, posing with tourists, fielding questions from a biographer, and massaging Habitat for Humanity donors. As I was moseying down Highway 61 toward archery, Carter was speeding off to the next event on a crowded schedule. The former president, pushing 90 years old, was still a restless man, consumed by a kind of frenetic benevolence. The striving continues. As Martin Luther recognized centuries earlier, those who subscribe to the ethic of works righteousness can never be certain they have accumulated enough merit. Jimmy Carter doesn't lack so much for passion as he does for respite. The man whose improbable election in 1976 redeemed the nation from the sins of Watergate has finally earned his own redemption. Jimmy Carter himself, however, may be the last to know.